Sometimes betrayal wears the face of someone you have known your entire life. At Ethan's housewarming party, Camila had no idea a forged letter would unravel the fragile thread holding her family together. The clinking of glasses echoed through the spacious living room of Ethan Hart's newly bought townhouse in Portland. The air buzzed with laughter, soft jazz, and the scent of freshly baked apple tarts that Linda Hart had brought to celebrate her son's housewarming. Camila Hart stood by the kitchen island, her smile polite, her heart not quite in the moment. Just 3 weeks had passed since Grandpa Walter's funeral, and the weight of grief still clung to her like the Oregon mist outside. Ethan stepped forward, champagne flute raised high. "I would like to make a toast," he said, voice steady, but with that familiar gleam in his eyes. The one that always meant he was about to take the spotlight. Everyone turned. Even the casual hum of background chatter dissolved into silence. "To new beginnings, new homes," Ethan paused, letting the room lean into his words. "And to Grandpa Walter's memory." A respectful quiet followed. Camila lifted her glass too, feeling a lump form in her throat. Walter Hart had been more than a grandfather to her. He was a friend, a mentor, the one who had taught her to tie her first fishing knot and identify birds by their calls. His absence still felt like an echo that would never stop repeating. "And speaking of Grandpa," Ethan continued, placing his glass on the coffee table, "I have an announcement to make." Camila blinked. Something in his tone made her shoulders stiffen. Ethan reached into his pocket and produced a slightly worn envelope. "Before he passed, Grandpa gave me this letter," he declared. "He wanted me to have the cabin in the Redwood Highlands. The one by the lake. He said it was meant for me." Gasps rippled through the room. Linda clapped a hand over her heart. Richard nodded in approval. Naomi, Ethan's girlfriend, squealed and wrapped her arms around his waist. Camila's mouth went dry. The cabin? The cabin where she had spent nearly every weekend for the past 3 years, fixing the porch with Grandpa, cooking simple meals, watching the mist roll across the lake in silence? That cabin? She stood frozen, her face calm, but her heartbeat erratic. Across the room, Lily Carter, her cousin, met her eyes with a look of confusion and disbelief. Camila forced a smile. "That is great news, Ethan." But the voice in her head was screaming. 3 weeks ago, Grandpa had given her a worn cedar box, telling her not to open it until the time felt right. She had kept it hidden, trusting his words. Inside that box, she remembered clearly, was a notarized deed. The cabin was already hers. She excused herself, mumbling something about needing the restroom, and slipped away from the warm light of the living room. In the hallway, her breathing turned shallow. She pulled out her phone and texted Lily. "Can you cover for me? Tell them I got called into work. I need to check something." A reply came quickly. "You okay? That was weird." Camila responded with a thumbs up and crept through the back door unnoticed. Outside, the October air was crisp, the sun already dipping below the horizon. She slid into her car, trembling. The drive home blurred past, red lights, green lights, city noise giving way to the stillness of her apartment. Her hands were shaking when she unlocked her closet and reached for the old cigar box. The scent of cedar and tobacco hit her immediately. She sat on the floor, legs crossed, breath shallow. "Do not open this until you need to know the truth," Grandpa had said, his weathered hands gripping hers. Now was the time. Camila opened the lid. Inside lay a folded notarized deed, a sealed envelope with her name, and a brass key she recognized instantly. It belonged to the roll-top desk in the cabin study. Her eyes scanned the deed. Walter Hart had transferred ownership to Camila Hart 6 months ago. Tears blurred her vision as she picked up the letter addressed to her. In his shaky, familiar handwriting, Grandpa had written, "My dearest Camila, if you are reading this, I am likely gone. I gave you the cabin while I was still alive, because I wanted to avoid complications. You are the only one who truly loved it like I did." Camila's fingers trembled. There was no mistake. Ethan was lying. She closed the box, the truth heavy in her chest. Her phone buzzed. It was Ethan. "Nice disappearing act. Don't worry, you can still visit the cabin. If you ask nicely." Camila stared at the message, jaw tightening. This was not something she could handle over text. Not something she would shout over a phone call. This required a confrontation, with the truth in her hands. She changed out of her soft clothes, dressed with purpose, and picked up the wooden box. As she stepped back into the night, she whispered, "Let's do this, Grandpa. The right way." The headlights cut through the dark as she made her way back to Ethan's house. The truth was coming. Camila parked a block away from Ethan's house, the same house where moments ago the truth had been twisted into applause and cheers. The wooden box rested on the passenger seat, its weight far greater than the cedar and brass it was made of. Inside it sat legacy, truth, and the kind of clarity that could shatter everything or finally set it right. She sat still for a moment, hands gripping the steering wheel. Her breath fogged the windshield as the October air grew colder. The trees lining the quiet neighborhood rustled in the breeze, and the hum of the party now reduced to faint murmurs behind closed doors. Her phone buzzed. A text from Lily. "Only family left. You coming back?" Perfect. Camila exhaled slowly. She had no intention of returning to a full room of friends and strangers. This moment wasn't for spectacle. It was for truth, and truth did not need to be loud. She stepped out of the car, box in hand, and walked toward Ethan's front porch with steady steps. Her heart thudded, but her expression remained composed. As she knocked, the door opened almost instantly. "Ethan." He looked surprised, then wary. "Work emergency over already?" he asked, casually leaning against the doorframe, trying to sound amused. "We need to talk," Camila said calmly, brushing past him before he could object. The living room still held the remnants of celebration. Her mother, Linda, was curled on the couch beside Naomi, chatting about paint colors. Her father, Richard, stood by the fireplace with a drink in hand, studying Ethan's letter. Lily sat in the corner, alert and watchful. All conversations halted when Camila entered. She walked to the coffee table and set the wooden box down with quiet finality. "I have something to share," she said, her voice steady. Ethan stiffened, eyes locked onto the box. The recognition was immediate, his jaw tightening. "What's that?" he asked too quickly. "Something Grandpa gave me 3 weeks ago," she replied. "He told me not to open it until the time was right. Tonight felt right." She opened the box, revealing the deed and the letter. She held them out like offerings, but there was no softness in her eyes. "6 months ago, Grandpa transferred the cabin to me through a notarized deed. It is already mine. It is not part of the estate." A silence fell over the room, the kind of silence that demanded attention. Linda leaned forward, frowning. Richard reached out to examine the document. "This is notarized," he said, flipping the pages slowly. "And this is Walter's signature, no doubt." "That is impossible," Ethan blurted, stepping closer. "Grandpa gave me that cabin. I have the letter." Camila nodded. "May I see it again?" Her father handed it over. Camila placed it beside the original letter from her grandfather. The difference was stark. One trembled with age and honesty. The other, too neat, too composed, lacked the tremor of Grandpa Walter's arthritis. "This signature is forged," Richard said, his voice low. Linda stood up, speechless, her gaze shifting to Ethan. Ethan, did you forge Grandpa's letter?" Ethan did not answer. That was answer enough. Naomi slowly stood, eyes wide. "I think I should go," she murmured, grabbing her purse. "Naomi." Ethan reached for her. She avoided his hand. "This isn't what it looks like," he tried, but the door closed behind her before he could finish. The room was heavy now. Lily whispered, "I knew something was off." Richard cleared his throat. "Ethan, why would you announce this now? We have not even read the will." Ethan's face was flushed, his confidence crumbling. "I found out about the deed," he admitted. "I was at Mr. Cooper's office last week. He mentioned the cabin wasn't part of the estate. He would not give details, but I knew. I figured if I said it first, if everyone heard it from me, maybe." "Maybe what?" Linda's voice cracked. "Maybe Camila would not say anything. Maybe people would believe me. Just once." He looked at Camila, eyes glassy. "You were always the favorite. You had everything with him. The cabin, the time, the stories. I barely existed." Camila blinked, her voice quiet. "You were invited, Ethan. He asked you. You said you were busy." Because I felt like an outsider, Ethan snapped. By the time I realized what I was missing, you were already part of a world I was never welcome in. Richard sat down slowly, running a hand through his graying hair. That does not justify lying, son. Ethan's posture sagged, and for the first time, the fight drained out of him. So what now? He asked, not meeting anyone's eyes. You win, Camila. This is not about winning, Camila said gently. And I'm not done. She reached into the box and pulled out another envelope. This one had Ethan's name written in Walter's shaky scrawl. He left this for you. Ethan stared. For me? She nodded. I haven't opened it. He said only you should. Hands trembling, Ethan tore the envelope open. As he read, the room seemed to pause. His face shifted from confusion to shock, then shame. He knew, Ethan whispered. Linda walked to his side. What does it say? Ethan handed it over. Richard read aloud. Dear Ethan, if you are reading this, Camila has opened my cedar box. That means one of two things. Either I am gone, or something has happened that made her feel it was necessary. I know your heart. You have always longed for recognition, and I regret not giving it in the way you need it. But the cabin belongs to Camila. She understood its soul. What you need is not a cabin, Ethan. It is a purpose. Enclosed is a check for $25,000. Use it to build something real. Something you can call your own. Not for comparison. Not for revenge. For joy. The silence that followed was not angry. It was stunned. Ethan sat back, shoulders shaking slightly. He saw right through me. Camila stepped forward. There's more. She pulled out a photo album from the box and opened it. Page after page showed snapshots of summers past. Camila and Ethan as children on the cabin dock. Grandpa holding them both as toddlers, marshmallows, fishing poles, laughter caught in print. He kept this in his desk, Camila said. He never stopped believing in you. Ethan looked at the images as if seeing ghosts. I really messed up. Yes, Camila said simply. But Grandpa thought you could do better. Ethan looked up, his eyes meeting hers. And for the first time in years, she saw him not as the boy who always competed, but the brother who had finally run out of excuses. The silence stretched between them, not sharp or hostile, but thick with the weight of everything that had gone unspoken for years. Camila closed the photo album and slid it gently back into the wooden box. Her hand lingered on the lid for a moment before she shut it, sealing in not just papers and memories, but the evidence of who Walter Hart had been to both of them. Her parents rose quietly. Richard placed a hand on Ethan's shoulder, a gesture of comfort layered with disappointment. Linda stood beside Camila, unsure whether to speak, her face pale from the evening's revelations. We will head home, Richard said softly, glancing between his children. This has been a lot. Camila nodded. Linda gave her a quick embrace before following her husband out the door, casting one last look at Ethan. Lily, ever the quiet observer, came over and hugged Camila too. Call me tomorrow, she whispered. There is more to talk about. Then she was gone, and Camila found herself alone in Ethan's house, the remnants of celebration now silent and stale. Ethan moved toward the kitchen slowly, wordless. He busied himself making coffee, something to do, something familiar. Camila sat at the dining table, watching him in the quiet. I did not plan the forgery, he said after a long pause, sliding a mug in front of her. When I found out about the deed, I got angry. I made the letter that night. I never thought I would actually use it. Then why did you? She asked, not accusatory, just tired. Ethan exhaled, staring into the depths of his untouched coffee. Everyone was here. They were smiling, laughing, congratulating me on the house. I wanted more. I wanted something that made me feel like I mattered. So I said it. About the cabin. And once it was out, I could not take it back. Camila wrapped her hands around the mug. The warmth did not reach her fingers. You could have had it, she said after a moment. Not the cabin, but the time. The memories. Grandpa invited you again and again. I know that now, Ethan admitted. But I was too proud. Too caught up in my own nonsense. And when he died, all I could think about was how little of him I had actually known. Camila studied him. This man who had always chased approval like it was a prize, had finally admitted to chasing the wrong things. "What are you going to do with the cabin?" he asked suddenly, his voice small. She paused. It was a question she had been asking herself since the moment she received the deed. "Keep it," she said slowly. "Fix it up. But not change it. It is still his. In spirit." Ethan nodded, a faint trace of relief flickering across his face. He would have liked that. Camila hesitated, then added, "You are welcome there. If you come with honesty." He blinked, surprised. "Even after what I did?" She looked down at the mug in her hands. "The cabin was meant to bring people together, not divide us. That does not mean I am not still angry, or that I trust you fully. But the door is open." He nodded, the offer registering not as forgiveness, but as a path. "Thank you." Camila stood. The fatigue of the night weighed heavy on her shoulders. She grabbed the wooden box and walked to the door. Ethan followed her quietly. "Do you think he knew this would happen?" he asked just before she stepped outside. She turned, one hand on the knob. "I think he hoped it would not. But he prepared just in case." Ethan gave a sad, knowing smile. He always was 3 steps ahead. That he was. The door clicked shut behind her, and the night wrapped around her as she walked to her car. She placed the box carefully on the passenger seat, then sat behind the wheel, staring out into the darkness for a long moment. There was sadness, yes. There was exhaustion. But there was also clarity. The next morning, she drove up to the Redwood Highlands alone. The cabin looked exactly the same as she remembered. Weathered cedar siding, emerald green shutters, the wide porch that wrapped around 3 sides like an embrace. Sunlight filtered through the towering pines, scattering golden light across the gravel driveway. She stepped out of her car and stood still, letting the crisp forest air fill her lungs. This was not just a cabin. It was memory. It was trust. It was legacy. She walked to the front door, pulled out the familiar brass key, and slid it into the lock. It resisted slightly. She jiggled it just right. The way Grandpa always said kept out unwanted guests. Inside, the scent of old wood, books, and faint traces of pipe tobacco lingered in the air. Everything was just as he had left it. The books on the shelf, the coat on the hook, the carved wooden bear by the fireplace. She moved through the room slowly, touching the edges of furniture, pausing at the windows, breathing in the silence. Her phone buzzed. "Lily again. How's the cabin?" Mom called. "Ethan is a wreck." Camila typed back. "Cabin's perfect. Not sure how I feel about Ethan." The reply came quickly. "He has been calling everyone, trying to explain. Your parents are still stunned." Camila placed her phone down and walked toward the window that overlooked the lake. The water sparkled in the morning light, reflecting the clouds drifting above. "I am here, Grandpa," she whispered to the stillness. "And I will take good care of it." The lake did not answer. It did not need to. 3 weeks passed. The cabin became her weekend sanctuary. She painted the porch, oiled the hinges, reorganized the shelves. With every nail and brushstroke, she felt closer to Walter, and strangely, closer to herself. Then one morning her phone buzzed again. A message from Ethan. "Can we talk? At the cabin, maybe." Camila stared at the message for a long time before replying. She gave him a date. A time. She was not sure if she was ready. But sometimes readiness was less important than willingness. The sky was an overcast wash of silver when Ethan's car pulled into the gravel driveway of the cabin. Camila was already on the porch swing, a mug of coffee cradled in her hands, her gaze fixed on the lake beyond the trees. The swing creaked softly beneath her, the only sound aside from the wind rustling through the tall pines. Ethan stepped out of his car hesitantly, dressed more casually than she had seen him in years. His usual sharp confidence was gone, replaced by something quieter. Unsure, he walked slowly toward the porch, taking in the scene around him. "This place hasn't changed," he said, his voice almost reverent. "That's the idea," Camila replied, nodding to the wooden chair across from her. He sat, his fingers tapping nervously against his knees. "I have been thinking about what to say for weeks," he began. "But no matter how I rehearse it, it always sounds inadequate." "Try anyway," she said, not warm, not cold. He inhaled deeply. "I am sorry. For the forgery. For lying. For all the things I told myself to justify it. I thought if I could have the cabin, it would somehow make up for everything I missed. That I could rewrite my own past by claiming a piece of yours. Camila watched him carefully. His words were unpolished, raw. She searched his face for that old spark of manipulation, but found only weariness. Why this place? She asked. Why now? Ethan looked out at the lake, his voice low. Because it was never about the cabin, not really. It was about what it represented. Time. Legacy. A connection I never let myself have. He paused. When Grandpa died, I realized just how empty my relationship with him had been. And it was no one's fault but mine. Camila said nothing. She sipped her coffee and let the silence settle. I used the money, he added, as if needing to prove something. From the check. I signed up for a woodworking course. The one Grandpa always talked about, the one I always said I was too busy for. She raised an eyebrow, surprised. I am terrible at it, he admitted with a self-deprecating smile. But I like it. It is quiet. It makes me focus. And I feel like I am building something, even if it is crooked and uneven. Camila's lips curved slightly. You would have liked that. Ethan looked over at her, eyes searching. Do you really think so? I know so. They sat in silence again, the stillness between them no longer strained, just uncertain. I want to show you something, she said at last, rising from the swing. Ethan followed her inside the cabin. The air was warm with the scent of old wood and faint tobacco. She led him to the study, where the antique roll-top desk stood in the corner beneath the morning light. Camila took out the brass key and opened it. Inside, everything was precisely arranged. Folders, photographs, envelopes. She pulled one out and handed it to Ethan. It was labeled with his name. Inside were newspaper clippings from his high school debate championships, photos from his college graduation, even a printout of a business magazine page featuring his name from last year's promotion. Ethan flipped through them in disbelief. He kept track of all this, he murmured. He called it his brag book, Camila said softly. There's a folder for every family member. Ethan's hands trembled slightly as he held the folder. I thought he had forgotten me. Or worse, dismissed me. He never did, she said. He just showed his pride differently. A long silence followed. Then Ethan laughed quietly, a single breath of disbelief. All this time I thought I was erased from his story. Turns out, I was just reading the wrong pages. Camila closed the drawer gently. He believed in second chances, she said. So do I. She reached into her canvas bag and pulled out a calendar, handing it to him. I marked the weekends I'll be up here. There are some maintenance projects coming up. And I could use an extra pair of hands. Ethan looked at her. Even terrible woodworking hands? She smirked. Especially those. His smile, hesitant and genuine, was the first real one she had seen in years. They stepped back outside together and sat at the edge of the dock, feet dangling just above the water. The lake rippled gently, the wind soft across its surface. The air was cool but not unkind. Ethan looked out over the water. I think Grandpa knew exactly what he was doing when he gave you this place. Camila glanced at him. What do you mean? You did not just inherit a cabin, he said. You inherited his role. The one who keeps the family tethered to something real. The sun filtered through the trees, casting golden paths across the lake. Camila sat quietly, letting his words settle. Maybe he was right. And maybe, just maybe, it was the beginning of something neither of them had expected. That evening, after Ethan had left and the sun had vanished behind the tall spines of the redwoods, Camila sat alone on the cabin's porch, a blanket wrapped around her shoulders, her mug now filled with cooling herbal tea. The stillness of the night was profound, as if the trees themselves were holding their breath. She watched the sky shift into a deep navy, the first stars barely visible. It was quiet but not empty, the kind of quiet that carried whispers from another time. She closed her eyes and imagined Walter sitting beside her again, cap pulled low, hands folded neatly over his stomach, the scent of pipe tobacco lingering even after he had quit. Camila whispered into the dark. I think I did the right thing, Grandpa. But I am not sure I'm ready for what comes next. There was no answer, just the rustling of pine needles and the creaking of the swing. The next morning she woke early. A fog clung low across the lake like a thick sheet of memory. Camila pulled on boots and an old flannel jacket, grabbed a basket, and made her way into the woods behind the cabin to collect kindling. This was her ritual now, part meditation, part maintenance. As she stepped over fallen logs and twisted roots, she thought of Ethan. His apology, his effort, and the folder Walter had kept for him. Pride. Always there, just hidden. And she thought of how close they had come to severing something permanently. By the time she returned to the cabin, the fog had begun to lift. She dropped the kindling by the fireplace and noticed something odd, a faint breeze where there should not have been one. The windows were closed, the door shut. She followed the sensation down the hallway and stopped at the study. The door was slightly ajar. She had closed it. She was sure of it. Pushing it open, she stepped inside and immediately felt it again, something off. The desk drawers were closed, but the calendar she had given Ethan had been moved. Not dramatically, but enough that she could tell. It had been resting against the side of the bookshelf. Now it was placed squarely on the desk. Her first thought was that Ethan had come back. But she had locked the door. She checked it again, twisting the knob, verifying the bolt. Still, unease crept into her spine like a slow leak. Camila glanced around the room. Everything else appeared undisturbed. She picked up the calendar and held it for a moment, wondering if her imagination was getting the best of her. No one else had keys. Not even her parents. Just her. Later that day, she drove into the nearby town of Haven Creek to visit the local hardware store and pick up supplies for patching the roof. She also made a quiet stop at the locksmith, ordering a full rekeying of every lock in the cabin. When she returned, the air felt different again. Not sinister, but unsettled. Like the cabin was waiting for something. Or someone. She moved through each room slowly, inspecting furniture, drawers, closets. Nothing missing. Nothing broken. But still, she could not shake the sensation that she was no longer alone in her stewardship. As the sun dipped lower, she poured herself a glass of water and returned to the porch. The breeze had picked up slightly. Leaves skittered across the steps. Her phone buzzed. A message from Lily. Just had lunch with your mom. She said Ethan's been quieter than usual. Dad's still mad, but I think he's softening. Camila typed a quick response. He came by last weekend. It was better than expected. She hesitated, then added. But something feels off at the cabin. Lily replied almost immediately. Off how? Camila stared at the screen. I do not know. Like it is holding its breath. Lily sent back a thoughtful emoji, followed by, do you want me to come stay a night or two? Camila looked up at the trees, at the shifting sky above the lake. Maybe soon. That night, as she turned off the lights and headed to bed, she paused in the study again. The calendar was still on the desk. Nothing moved. She reached out and turned it face down, unsure why. Maybe it was silly. Maybe it was caution. Then in the silence she heard it. A single, sharp creak from the floorboard behind her. She spun around. Nothing. Just the bookshelf. The lamp. The walls holding in their secrets. Camila backed out slowly, closed the door, and slid the bolt she had installed earlier that day. The next morning, the calendar was back in its original place. Camila stood in the study frozen. The calendar, which she had deliberately turned face down the night before, now stood upright again, leaned neatly against the edge of the desk. It was not fear that gripped her, but a slow, rising suspicion. She moved carefully to the desk, lifted the calendar, and ran her fingers along the smooth wood underneath, then paused. A scratch. Barely visible. Faint. A half-moon gouge just beside the calendar's edge. She dropped to her knees and began inspecting the roll-top desk with more focus. She knew it like the back of her hand. Grandpa Walter had spent countless hours writing here, sorting letters, drawing maps, even sketching plans for fishing trips. The compartments, the drawers, the hidden catch in the side panel. He had once shown her every detail. Except this. Her hand brushed along the bottom drawer, the shallow one where he used to keep his notepads. She pulled it open and tapped along the base. Hollow. She frowned. Gently, she pressed her fingers underneath the drawer's interior. One corner gave way with a soft click. A thin panel lifted. Behind it, neatly tucked into the hidden recess, was an envelope. Her name was not on it. Instead, it simply read, "For the one who follows." Camila stared, her heart thudding. She sat back on the wooden floor, the envelope in her lap. The air in the room felt thicker now, as if the cabin was holding its breath again. She opened the envelope slowly, unfolding the single sheet of paper inside. It was Walter's handwriting, as shaky and unmistakable as ever. "To the one who finds this. If you are reading these words, then I am gone, and you are sitting in the place I have guarded for most of my life. This cabin is more than timber and stone. It is a gate, in a way, a passage between what was and what must be remembered. I built a life here, but I also buried parts of it. Some of those parts were painful, others precious. I have left a key in the book behind the desk. It opens the old storm cellar, the one beneath the woodshed. Most have forgotten it exists. That is on purpose. You will decide whether the past deserves to be forgotten. Do not enter alone. W.H. Camila's eyes widened. The storm cellar? She had never known of one. Walter had never mentioned it. She rose slowly and turned toward the bookshelf. Her eyes scanned the rows until they stopped at the old copy of Walden, the one with Walter's initials scratched into the inside cover. She pulled it from the shelf. It felt heavier than it should. Flipping it open, a small brass key fell into her palm. She stood still for a moment, gripping it tightly, her mind spinning. Why had Walter hidden this? And what lay below the woodshed that required secrecy even after death? She placed the letter and the key on the desk, then stepped outside. The evening sun filtered through the trees, golden and soft, but the calm of the forest no longer felt innocent. It felt charged. The woodshed sat at the edge of the clearing, just beyond the line where the pine trees grew thicker. Camila had not entered it in months. It had always been filled with tools, shovels, fishing gear. But now she approached with a different purpose. Her boots crunched softly on the needles as she walked. The air grew cooler, the shadows longer. She reached the door, hand on the rusted handle, then hesitated. Walter's words echoed. "Do not enter alone." She stepped back. "Not tonight." She turned around and walked back to the porch, heart still thudding, key in her jacket pocket. That night, she dreamed of the cabin. Not as it was now, but as it had been decades ago. Walter young again, his hair dark, standing beside someone she could not see clearly. They were arguing. Something about silence. About truth. When she awoke, the brass key was still in her palm, her knuckles white from how tightly she had held it through the night. Later that morning, she called Lily. "I need you to come up," she said. There was a pause on the line. Then Lily replied, "I'll be there by sunset." Camila hung up and looked toward the woodshed. She had inherited more than memories. She had inherited a secret. By the time Lily arrived, the late autumn sun was beginning its descent, painting the tops of the trees with a wash of gold and amber. Her car crunched along the gravel, and Camila stepped out to greet her, jacket zipped to the collar, the brass key cold in her pocket. Lily climbed out, pulled into a hug before saying anything. "You sounded serious," she murmured. "I found something," Camila said simply. They stood for a moment in the fading light, then walked toward the porch. Camila led her inside and handed her the letter. Lily read it in silence, her brow furrowing deeper with each line. When she reached the end, she looked up sharply. "The storm cellar? I thought that was just a storage pit. Grandpa never talked about it." Camila shook her head. "I never saw it. Never even knew it existed." Together, they gathered 2 flashlights, gloves, and jackets, then headed out toward the woodshed. The trees whispered overhead, branches clicking in the rising wind. A chill crept through the forest, colder than it had been all week, as if something old and untouched was beginning to stir. The woodshed stood in quiet defiance at the edge of the property, weathered but strong. Camila opened the creaking door and stepped inside. Dust swirled in the shafts of light that streamed through the cracks in the wooden walls. The scent of oil, rust, and old rope hung heavy in the air. They scanned the floor, their boots thudding against the rough planks. Then Lily spotted it. "Here," she said, crouching near the back wall. A panel, different from the others. Slightly raised. The seams barely visible. Camila knelt beside her and brushed away the years of dust with her sleeve. A small, iron latch lay beneath the grime. She pulled the brass key from her pocket. It fit perfectly. The lock gave way with a metallic click, and the panel released with a slow, aching groan. A hatch. Camila grabbed the old handle and lifted. Beneath was a set of narrow wooden steps descending into darkness. She aimed her flashlight downward, the beam revealing walls of stone and dirt. The smell that rose from below was cool and stale, like a sealed basement left untouched for generations. "You still want to do this?" Lily asked. Camila nodded once. They descended together. The stairs creaked, but held. At the bottom, the space opened into a low, stone-walled chamber no larger than a small bedroom. Dust coated every surface. Shelves lined the walls, filled with boxes, faded books, and jars sealed with wax. A work table stood against the far wall, and on it, something covered in canvas. Camila stepped forward and pulled the cloth away. A typewriter. Old but familiar. Walter's old Underwood. The one she thought had broken years ago. Beside it sat a thick stack of pages bound by twine. She picked it up, untied the cord, and opened to the first page. A record kept in silence. By Walter Hart. Camila read aloud, her voice soft. "I built this place with my hands and filled it with memory. But there are things I could never say aloud. So I wrote them instead." She turned the page. "My father died in this cabin. And no one ever knew why. Not really. They said it was an accident, but it was not. And I have carried that truth alone for too long." Camila and Lily exchanged a stunned glance. "He kept a secret this big?" Lily whispered. Camila continued reading. "There are parts of a man's past he hides even from those he loves most. But in this space, I left the whole truth. Not to shame, not to absolve, but to complete the story." They moved through the cellar slowly, reading passages from Walter's manuscript, inspecting the artifacts he had kept sealed away. A rusted lantern from the war, a folded American flag, faded photographs, and near the far wall, another box. Metal. Locked. Camila ran her fingers along its edge. "No key?" Lily asked. Camila shook her head. "We will figure it out." But the weight of what they had found already pressed heavy against her chest. Her grandfather, the man who taught her to fish, who read her bedtime stories, who trusted her with the cabin, had also carried a burden deeper than she ever imagined. They climbed the stairs in silence, returning to the surface as the night closed in. Once back inside the cabin, Camila laid the manuscript gently on the table. She could not read it all yet. Not now. But she understood something fundamental had shifted. Walter's legacy was not just what he gave. It was what he left hidden. And now, it was hers to understand. The fire crackled in the stone hearth, casting shifting shadows across the cabin walls as Camila turned the pages of Walter's manuscript. Lily had gone to bed hours ago, exhausted from their descent into the cellar. But Camila could not sleep. Not with the words she had already read swirling in her chest like smoke. Walter's handwriting, shaky but precise, continued to reveal a life lived in silence. Each page was a window into another version of the man she had known. A man who carried more sorrow than he let show, who had made peace with the forest, but not with his ghosts. "My father, Martin Hart, was not a kind man," one entry began. "To the world, he was stern but respected. To me, he was something else entirely. The cabin was his refuge. And mine. But for different reasons." Camila's throat tightened as she read on. "He fell from the second-floor landing in 1964. That was what the sheriff's report said. A misstep. A fall. A tragedy. But I knew better. Because I was there. And I saw it happen." The next line had been crossed out. Ink scrawled through it in a burst of hesitation. But beneath the heavy marks, the impression of the words remained faintly visible. He was going to hurt someone. Again. Asterisk asterisk. Camila stared at the page. Her hands shook. Walter had written the truth only once, then tried to hide it. But even attempts to erase pain could not make it disappear. She flipped to the next entry. Dated months later. "I kept the truth to protect my mother. To protect myself. But the silence became a wall. One I could not climb. I tried to be different than him. Kinder. Gentler. I think I managed that most of the time. But I still built walls. especially around the parts of me that feared I was like him. Camila sat back, heart pounding. The fire popped, startling her. Embers rose in a brief shower of light, before fading into the blackened stone. She thought of all the years she had spent sitting on the porch with Walter, listening to his stories. The long silences between conversations. The distant look in his eyes. And how he always seemed most at peace when he was teaching her how to do something with her hands. Sand a piece of wood, tie a knot, oil a hinge. He had given her that cabin not just because she loved it, but because he knew she would listen to the parts of it that did not speak. The next morning, Lily found her asleep in the chair, the manuscript resting on her chest. She gently lifted it, placed a blanket over Camila's shoulders, then made coffee while the cabin slowly came alive in the morning light. When Camila woke, the scent of pine and brewing beans greeted her. "You read through the night," Lily said softly, handing her a mug. Camila nodded. Her eyes were tired, but clear. "I had to know." They sat on the porch again, the air crisp but not biting. A pair of geese skimmed across the lake's surface in the distance. "He thought he was protecting everyone," Camila said. "But he was also hiding himself. His pain. His guilt." Lily frowned. "So what are you going to do with all this?" "The manuscript. The box. The locked metal case." Camila sipped her coffee and stared out over the water. "I do not know yet. But I am not going to bury it again." They went back to the cellar that afternoon. With a crowbar and patience, they pried open the locked box Walter had tucked away. Inside were artifacts. Old photographs of Martin Hart. Police records. A battered notebook written in her great-grandfather's hand. The man Walter had feared becoming had written words soaked in rage. Pages filled with bitterness, control, and distorted pride. Reading them made Camila's skin crawl. She closed the notebook and placed it back in the box. Some things were not meant to be burned, but they also did not belong in the house above. They left the box sealed and returned it to the cellar. That night, Camila added something new to the cabin. A leather-bound journal of her own. She titled the first page, "What I Want to Remember." She wrote not of Walter's secrets, but of the time he taught her how to use a level. Of the day they replaced the rotting dock planks together. Of how he had let her read aloud while he cleaned fishing reels. Then she paused. And wrote, "I know your truth now, Grandpa. And I still love you." She closed the book gently, placed it in the top drawer of the desk, and felt something shift. The cabin had been his refuge. Now it was hers. But it would not be a place of silence anymore. A week passed. Then another. Camila remained at the cabin, balancing solitude with restoration. She repaired the front steps with new pine boards, cleaned out the old pantry, and replaced the frayed window screens in the back bedroom. With each task, the cabin felt less like a place inherited, and more like one lived in again. The journal Walter left continued to haunt her, though not in fear. More like a shadow, gently reminding her that stories only matter when someone is willing to tell them. She had not heard from Ethan since their afternoon on the dock. A silence she both appreciated and resented. Perhaps he was giving her space. Or perhaps he was unsure whether space had become a wall. Then, on a rainy Thursday afternoon, his name appeared on her phone. "Ethan asterisk, are you up at the cabin this weekend?" She stared at the message for a while before replying. "Camila asterisk, I am." A minute passed. "Ethan asterisk, could I stop by? Just for a little while." She typed, then deleted her response. Typed again. Finally she sent. "Camila asterisk, come Saturday morning. Bring work gloves." The next 2 days passed slowly. She read more of Walter's manuscript, but avoided the final pages. She found herself prepping the workshop, clearing out extra tools, sharpening blades that had dulled in disuse. She left a second thermos on the porch table. Ethan arrived just before 10. The rain had lifted, though the earth still smelled of wet bark and moss. He parked in the same spot as last time, walked up the steps and paused. "You remembered my glove size," he said, lifting the pair she had left by the door. "I remembered you hate splinters," she replied. He smiled faintly, then followed her inside. They started in the woodshed, clearing out decaying boxes and hauling rotted boards down the hill. Afterward, They cut new planks for the small overhang above the cabin's side entrance. They worked mostly in silence, but it was the kind that builds trust rather than tension. During lunch, they sat on overturned crates by the fire pit, eating simple sandwiches and sipping hot tea. "I thought you might not respond," Ethan said finally, looking into the flames. "I thought about it," Camila admitted. "But then I remembered what Grandpa said in his letter, that I'd keep the door open." He nodded. "I have been reading more," she said. "There is a lot I did not know." "I have been thinking more," he replied. "There is a lot I did not try." They fell into silence again, this time warm. Ethan stared at the cabin. "It feels different now. Not like a relic. Like something alive again." "That is what I wanted," Camila said softly. When they finished their tea, she asked him to follow her to the study. She opened the roll-top desk and pulled out a second copy of the calendar, the one she had marked with restoration plans. "I updated it," she said. "There are more projects coming, and I am going to need help." He took the calendar, flipped through it, and looked at her. "Are you sure?" Camila paused, then nodded. "I do not trust easily, Ethan. Not anymore. But I know what it means to lose someone and not be able to fix it." He held her gaze. "I want to earn it," he said. "If you'll let me." "I will." She stood and led him outside. They ended the day repainting the back porch railings. By the time the sun dipped behind the hills, their hands were sore and streaked with dried white paint. But the railing gleamed in the soft light, renewed. As they packed up the brushes, Camila handed him something else, a clean notebook. "What's this?" he asked. "Your own story," she said. "Write something down. Not for me. Not for Grandpa. For you." Ethan opened the first page. Blank. Waiting. He looked up. "I think I will." Later, as he drove away, Camila watched his taillights disappear into the trees. For the first time since Walter's death, the cabin no longer felt like a place built to hold grief. It was becoming something else. A place where things could begin again. The following weeks brought changes that unfolded not in declarations, but in small, intentional acts. The kind that stitched torn things back together without anyone needing to say the words out loud. Ethan returned most weekends, always early, always with gloves already on. He no longer rushed to fill silences or prove anything. He learned to listen, to the creak of old floorboards, the rhythm of hammers, the way Camila's voice softened when she talked about Walter. They repaired the boathouse roof first, then replaced the cracked panes in the sunroom. On rainy days, they cataloged the books in Walter's shelves, dusting off spines with care, separating those to preserve and those to donate. Sometimes they spoke about the past. Sometimes they did not. One Saturday, Camila found a folded sheet of paper placed beside her journal in the desk drawer. It was Ethan's handwriting. "I have decided not to keep hiding the worst parts of myself," it read. "Because maybe, if I let light in, those parts will grow into something better." No signature. Just a single pressed wildflower inside. Camila closed the note gently and tucked it into her journal. Beside the page where she had written, "I still love you." The manuscript Walter left remained locked in a cedar box, placed high on the shelf in the study. She had not yet read the final pages. Not because she feared what they held, but because she already knew. Walter's story was never about a single confession or mystery solved. It was about the ache of trying to do better with what little time is left. About choosing to leave something behind that could help someone else build something whole. One morning, Camila invited her parents to visit. Linda walked the cabin like a museum she had forgotten existed. Richard asked about every change they had made, pausing often in front of old photographs that lined the hallway. They were quieter than usual, softer around the edges. When they left, her father clasped Ethan's shoulder longer than necessary. It was the first time since the forged letter that he had touched his son without tension. That night, Camila lit a small fire in the pit beside the lake. Ethan joined her there, both of them wrapped in flannel, feet stretched toward the warmth. He passed her a mug of coffee. "I never thought this place could feel like mine," he said quietly. "It does not have to be yours," Camila replied. "It can just be ours." A long breath. Then he nodded. Behind them, the cabin glowed warm through the windows. The porch they had rebuilt. The walls they had repainted. the quiet rooms now filled with echoes not of sorrow, but of renewal. Camila leaned back, watching sparks from the fire float into the trees above. "I think we're doing it," Ethan said, as if he needed permission to believe it. She smiled, not looking away from the flames. "We are." The wind shifted, carrying the scent of pine and distant rain. Somewhere in the darkness, an owl called low and steady. Later that night, Camila returned to the study alone. She opened Walter's manuscript to the final entry. It was brief. To the one who stayed. "Thank you for loving this place enough to listen to its silences. What we do not say still matters. Let the cabin live. Let it forgive. I already have. Each." Camila closed the manuscript, placed it gently on the shelf, and turned off the light. The cabin exhaled with her. Outside, the lake lay still and silent. But nothing felt unfinished.